Hello, Sense of Things audience. It's Jeff and Ron here again on another Thursday afternoon, and we're covering a lot of things this week coming out of the Labor Day week with some new data, some interesting things that happened since the last time we were on, and a updated story, a couple fun stories from both Ron and I today. So, Ron, good seeing you, bud.
Yes. How are you, bud?
I am fantastic. The best news I got is in 7 days, we should actually be below 90 here in Austin.
Hey, you enjoy that.
We will enjoy it. We almost beat a record this year of 100 plus degree days. We're 15 days short of the all-time record from 2011 when I moved to Austin. So
I hear you. The lows here are in the 80s, but we're still averaging in the mid to high 90s.
yeah,
But I got to tell you, it feels pretty good at most of the days now. So
you've been
not too
you're
bad.
like
But I will tell you, I am looking forward to the last 4 months of the year. I think what's going to happen is going to happen as we both predict in the markets and the economy,
Yep.
which that means everything's on sale for clients. So
Yeah.
looking good. I know we're going to talk about some economic stuff. So let's revisit one of your old stories that
Yes,
you want
one
to
of
give
my
a quick
favorite
update on.
stories, my favorite stories of all time. Let me bring him up here again. Okay, share screen. Let's find him. Okay, we are revisiting Reza Ray Baluki, who, if you don't remember, if you didn't see it a couple years ago or a couple months ago, we visited him. It was a story about him in 2021 where he tried to run across the Atlantic Ocean in a what affectionately now is known as the hamster wheel, not the donut, but the hamster wheel. So he tried to run across the ocean. He didn't actually have any means of steering this, so he ended up on one of the beaches there in St. Augustine, Florida. That's where it beached itself. This time he was much more successful than he's ever been. He's done this now 6 times. It was much more successful. He made it actually 70 nautical miles out to Tybee Island off the coast of Florida, was just whaling along, doing fine. And the Coast Guard caught him because they were out there worried about people getting prepared for Hurricane Franklin. And he was out there again, and they got there, tried to stop him. He wouldn't stop. And so this was the greatest part of all time. He threatened them when they tried to board with a 12. He said he was armed with a 12-inch knife, and then he was going to die by suicide because he was going to blow himself up with a bomb. So they had to call the Navy out, explosive ordnance disposal, got him off, found out there was no bomb, and he's now in jail and will probably be there for a bit of a while at this point.
As if he wasn't crazy enough to do this stunt, he is already crazy anyway.
He's nuts as it is. And then my favorite part, as always, he's, like I said, he did this in 2014, 2016, and 2021. And the reason he is doing this is he is trying to raise money for homeless people, the Coast Guard, and something else. I can't even remember what it is. But I'm like, you're threatening to blow the Coast Guard up, but you're raising money for them.
He obviously doesn't give a crap about anybody. So even whether he goes to jail or not, when he comes out, he's going to do it again.
Absolutely. He's on a trend with this. That now they did actually, or they impounded his giant hamster wheel at this point.
He couldn't build another one.
So I felt like I just had to update this one. It was just so good. Just caught the thing real quick today, and I was like, oh my God, he did it again.
I hear you. All right. I have something fun. I can't stand when you walk into a supermarket or a store or whatever, and they already got crap out for holidays that are 2 or 3 months away. 2 weeks ago, I already saw Halloween stuff. And it got me thinking a little bit about some of the stuff that we've seen over the years. So what I'm about to show you is not a bunch of Halloween pics, and it isn't a snapshot of my yearbook. So these are mugshots of the people that live among us. So I decided to number them, so this way we could take a vote in the podcast notes of who you just think is the craziest. Now, I will say, this guy here, number 10, going first to third with the hair is pretty good.
Mhm.
This guy down here, number 13, obviously something happened. I mean,
A
but
lot.
I think one of my favorites is number 2. Like, where are you in your life that you feel like I'm going nowhere? I've hit rock bottom. I don't care about my appearance. So I'm going to get a tattoo on my face that makes me look like a scary, crazy, you know what.
He kind of looks like the Joker a little bit.
And by the way, number 8, those are not fake Hollywood teeth.
Nice. Nice.
And by the way, number 7, he may have been on an episode of Pimple Popper. I'm not really sure.
Dr. Pimple Popper for sure. I've actually seen number 18. I was in Florence, Italy, and there's a statue of number 18 of Mary Magdalene.
The caption under her picture on the website was Medusa.
Okay, I get it. I get it.
So that makes some sense here. So I'm hoping that I don't see your picture up here one day, my friend.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out number 3. He looks like somebody stretched his head too far. And
listen, if we start to analyze and ask why and try and figure out why, we should be in one of these pictures at that point.
Like I said, poor number 13, man. I'm like, all I can think of is National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. I ain't nothing between my head, my brains and the ground, except for a piece of government plastic. So
look, something drastic happened to that guy. At least he's got nice teeth, for crying out loud.
He does have actually much out of the whole group. He's got the best teeth out of there. If he could just get half a head back, he'd be pretty.
Hey, look, we should probably do a mashup of all 18 of these people and take like the best features and mash them together. And that should be the mascot for Sense of Things.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought this was fun. I'll keep it up here. Awesome. People want to vote on it. Maybe when we get to
please do
the next podcast, we'll post the top 3 votes.
Love it, love it, love it.
Hey, but listen, I got a couple other good slides for us to talk about real quick, because I know you want to show something too.
Yeah,
I thought it was interesting because it's been a theme in many of our podcasts about the weighting of the stocks and the indexes, and people are looking, well, the market's up X%, but 2/3, 3/4 of that upside has really been only a handful of stocks. And I thought it was interesting. This chart really amplifies where we are, such as the blue line is the largest stocks. And look, this is going back 100 years, for crying out loud, right? The largest 5 stocks is the middle line, and the top 10 stocks is the top line. So if you're just comparing, if your benchmark is basically the top stocks, whether it's the S&P 100 or the 500, or I didn't actually see what this was weighted on, but the idea is that if you only invested in the top 10 stocks and momentum over the last 100 years, you outperformed everybody.
Yeah.
So this kind of goes along with our theme. Every portfolio that you and I manage is different. And the idea is, what is the benchmark to say, if the market's up 10% and I'm up 11%, I only did 1% better? Is that 10% of that broad-based market, is that a clear reflection of what's a good benchmark for your portfolio, your risk, your timeline, and what your goals and aspirations are? And everybody's different. So I'm not sure what you use as a benchmark, but I have 2 or 3 different benchmarks. I definitely don't use the Dow or the NASDAQ. The S&P I may talk about, or you may use for fodder for discussion, but typically I'm looking at equal weighted benchmarks for either growth or for income oriented portfolios. I'm not sure what you do.
I use blended indexes. So I'll typically, I blend a whole bunch of indexes together because the software I use allows me to create custom benchmarks like that. Mine will have a little bit of international exposure. So they're a little bit closer to what the actual portfolios are at that point. And so we can look at it versus the index or whatever. Typically for US market, I'm going to use the Wilshire 5000.
Really? There's only like 3,200 stocks in the Wilshire 5000 index.
Yeah. I just feel like it's going to give us an idea of what the overall economy, not just the top 500 companies, are doing. It gives us an overall economy to work with. So if I give one index, it's typically going to be the Wilshire 5000.
Gotcha. All right. Then the other thing, I know we're going to continue to sound like an echo chamber here, but and we're pretty dogmatic about our beliefs and what we see
Yeah.
here in the next 6 to 9 months. But I saw this, actually, I pulled this off of Morningstar's website of the key charts that you should focus in on. And I thought this was interesting going into the end of last year. And this is trying to predict a recession over the next 4 quarters. Obviously, the data here is a little lagging. I don't know where you see it. I know we talked about it a few times. I think we're in the 7th inning of a 9 inning game into possibly a recession. I said second half of this year, whether it's the end of this year or next year, I think we're butting up against it. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think there's headwinds going into the end of the year. I still think we're not really going to see recession until next year, probably first quarter. I don't think it's going to be really long at this point. The good part, I guess, if you could say anything out of this, is the Fed kept raising rates far and beyond what people expected them to, which
I think we got one more raise too.
Yeah, and probably one more, maybe two, that are in there. I think the good part out of all of that is, especially the fact that they've cleaned up their balance sheet a little bit or shortened up their balance sheet. It gives them a lot of firepower instead of where they were before. Yeah, basically at almost 0% interest rates. They had nothing if we went into recession. So now they've got a ton more toys to play with at this point. So the chances are I think they can get us out of a recession quicker by cutting rates pretty quick if they needed to. And they've got a lot more tools in their shed. So,
and I think the interesting thing to that, if we throw geopolitical catalyst aside, that aside. And that's why sometimes the best way to watch Bloomberg, Fox Business, and CNBC, best way to watch it is on mute. Because you got all these pundits coming on, and they purposely bring on people that are on both sides, and you don't really know what their motivation is many times. Maybe they're just trying to pump up the market, or maybe they're net short, or their clients are net short, so they're beaten. Who knows? But my whole point is, they could talk all they want about the intentions of the Fed. But if you listen to what the Fed is saying, they've said two significant things, and they haven't deviated from this in 9 or 12 months. And those two things are, number one, if we need to, we're going to continue to raise rates. We're data dependent. No crap. They've been saying that forever. But my point is, things are still at an elevated level. So we could easily see 1 or 2 more rate hikes in the next few months. And number two, they have been saying this for over a year now, higher rates for longer. And you and I we joked about it, and we saw that, the Fed futures shows that there might be a lowering of the rates before the end of the year. This was 3 more months ago. Now that's pushed out to June or July of next year. They've already said higher for longer. That means for the foreseeable future, 6, 9, 12 months, rates will probably remain above 5%. We're at 5.5 now. We may go 5 3/4 to 6, but we're going to remain above 5 probably till spring, summer of next year, unless there's some geopolitical event or some cataclysmic event in the US that's going to say, hey, we need to take a point off. We need to cut it in half. They're not going to go to 0 anytime soon. But to go below 5 less than 12 months from now without any specific event, they've already told.
Well, and the other part is, it's as much as each side would say, oh, well, we're trying to do our best to cut our spending and everything else. They're going into an election year, and it's a major presidential election year with a crap ton of the senators coming up this time. I think 60% of the Senate is coming up this time. There is no way on earth they're going to cut any spending anywhere at this point, as much as they talk a good game. So you've got
not to get reelected.
Yeah, you're not going to get reelected by cutting back on stuff for people. And that's basically what we've become, is this country of whatever you're going to buy me, then I'll vote for you at that point. So now you put yourself into a situation where they're not going to cut spending, and sure, that's just going to keep inflation pumped up. And then now you've got the Fed going, hey, we just got to keep chalking. We're going to just keep chalking away at it and adding more inflation on, or adding more interest rates on.
Well,
I agree.
The overarching and major issue that has been out there is the following, and I don't have the exact budget number, but I just heard somebody talking about this last week. 80 to 85% of our overall spending is in three things:
Mhm.
entitlement, Social Security, military and government,
Mhm.
and
Interest rates,
debt service on our treasuries,
which
which
is
is over $1
tied with
trillion a year.
which
Those
is
three
tied with
things
our
are better than
military
80%
spending.
of our spending.
Yeah. And it's tied with our military spending now. And by,
Correct.
yeah, I think by what, 2035, it's supposed to be the largest portion of our budget.
So they're not going to cut back much on military. I'm sorry,
Nope.
they're not going to cut back on military.
Mm.
And certainly if they want to get reelected, they're not going to cut back on entitlements.
Nope.
So how do you cut our debt service in half? How do you do that? Raise taxes. That's the only way they can do it. And we'll see that if the administration remains the same.
Yeah.
Somehow, you know, the Republicans, and without getting political, the Republicans say, we need to cut taxes. Yeah, that gets you elected. All that does is throw us into a recession if we can't service our debt. Print more money, we're going to dilute our dollar. So I'm not trying to blame one side or the other right now, but no politician is coming out with a plan to cut our debt service in half. And if we did that, we can improve a hell of a lot of other things in this country.
Sure.
But, you know, that, and you thought it may happen with the debt ceiling debate. And what did they do? 1%, 2% reduction in, please, they're gonna give that right back in a year or two. It's ridiculous. So anyway, I know you had a chart you wanted to show about the recent economic numbers.
Yeah, I wanted to share something. And this is something I've been watching for a while here. And it was interesting. It's always interests me to see how certain news groups report things. So one of the things I've been watching over the last, I would say 6 to 8 months, is this same thing that keeps happening. The job growth numbers come out. Oh, it's wonderful. Oh, it's 300,000. And then a month later, they'll come back and revise that number, and the number is not nearly as good. That doesn't get any press. So the first time I've seen any kind of press on this was something that just happened last week. So we missed it because we weren't on this last week, but I caught this article, and it's in the New York Times, which is not always known as the most negative to anything, but I love how they restate this. So over the last year, so this was from April 22nd or April 2021 to, or no, April of 2022 to March of 2023. They were looking at the numbers, and they revised the numbers back, cutting 300,000 jobs off of this 2023
And it's
number.
not political.
Yeah, not political at all. But the thing I love about this is they put this little chart here and go, look, it's just, they just shaved a hair off of this. They shaved 300,000 jobs off of 2 million. That's 12 freaking percent of the jobs. That's not shaving. That's cutting massively. And so that tells me it's one of two things. Either it's political and the Bureau of Labor Statistics is playing politics and trying to make it look better than it is, or they are massively incompetent and they can't count anything. Which,
how about yes?
Yes, the answer is probably a little bit of both. But it's one of those things that I look at and I'm like, okay, guys, you're really off massively.
Stay on this tab for one quick second. I can't believe you're showing us. I was watching one of my programs either yesterday or the day before, and they were showing GDP revisions.
Okay.
And they are still revising the GDP from 07, 8, and 9 in over the last 24 months.
Okay, give it up, guys.
So 15, 16 years later, they're still doing GDP revisions.
Why are you revising things?
And now they found out that usually the revisions are greater when we're in a recession, meaning to the downside, because they don't have all the calculations.
Yep.
But they underestimated from the original GDP back in 08 and 09 to now, either 8.5 or 8.7% difference.
Good God.
How is there such a wide margin? Now, I realize to the downside, maybe there's more factors to the upside, but holy crap.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And I look at this too, just this chart originally, I'm like, man, we were at like 7.9 million jobs, and we've come off massively down to 3.16 going into July. It's come down really drastically.
Well, that's why the unemployment number doesn't make any sense, right? We're at
Yep.
3.8%, but that doesn't count the people that left the workforce.
That's exactly correct. And I was listening to somebody this morning on this. There were so many people that just bailed out of the workforce during the pandemic and said, if they want me to come back to the office, I'm just not coming back. And I'm going to retire at that point. The other piece of it, and this is people that listen to the show, we talk about this a lot. This is the JOLTS number. So this is basically the open job listings at this point. And this goes from 2013. I've got the chart set up that goes from 2013 to 2023. And it's really interesting to see. We had probably a pretty consistent amount of job openings. We've always just slowly grown as we go. Of course, this is COVID, so we saw that big drop off. Then there was a massive amount of job openings where people just didn't want to go back to work. And so there was these ton of job openings. And it's interesting to see how that's just kept creeping back. As we talk about recession and as we look at what's going on in the non-farm payrolls, it's coming back online. If I was to chart this out, I'd say it's coming back online, but it's actually blowing through the bottom side of that chart again, of that average line, to say that we're coming back and past that. I think when I always look at what I look at, and it's all of a sudden I'm seeing young people again that are working in restaurants. For the longest time, I was seeing people my age working in restaurants during the pandemic.
85?
Yes, it was. But I still have my hair, so that's a good thing, and it's not gray. But now I'm seeing high schoolers, college age kids working in restaurants again. I think we're getting back to that point of more full employment. But I think, like I said, that like you were saying, seeing the job numbers drop so far, yeah, unemployment doesn't seem as bad, but we're rolling down a cliff pretty fast.
That unemployment number breaches 4%,
yeah,
but absolutely approaches and breaches 5%, that JOLTS number will get cut in half.
Yeah. That was the big shocker of last week. Where was it here? We were at what, 3.87 last week? Because we saw a pretty big pop in the unemployment rate was 3.87. Yeah. So we're getting up there.
Yeah. Like I said, get your popcorn. The next 4 months is going to be very interesting.
It is.
I think more so in the next 8 weeks, but certainly through the end of the year, I think we should get some kind of a feel going in the next year on what to expect. I think next year we'll have an up year, but it could be a slog to get there, especially the bloodbath going into September and October into the November election.
Yeah, absolutely. It always gets crazy during the election year because as one candidate does better than the other candidate, and then it's all over the place, and the market's trying to guess and bet on whatever it is.
And we get to hear a whole new set of lies on both sides about all the candidates.
Yep.
I think people enjoy the mudslinging more than people enjoy like real true content of what this person stands for. Well, I think we've seen that already with a handful of the candidates. I think just people love the blood sport of it versus we're really getting somebody with character and who has diplomacy and has the smarts to get the job done. I don't really think people care about that anymore.
And the solution to most of the Senate is a bunch of old people that are hanging out there. As I heard yesterday, my favorite comment that I've heard in forever, one of the commentators on one of the shows I was listening to, she goes, we have the most entitled group, or we have the most entitled rest home.
Yeah, nursing home or something like that.
Yeah, the entitled nursing home.
Look, I feel bad. Look, I appreciate anybody in public service that is doing it truly for public service. But on one side, you got Dianne Feinstein, and on the other side, you got Mitch McConnell.
Yeah.
And neither one of them should be there anymore. Look, that's my own opinion.
You're in your 80. What? Dianne Feinstein's almost 90 something.
I think she is 90.
Yeah, and I think he's.
Look, Strom Thurmond was there until he was 100.
And literally died in his seat.
Yeah.
And went from both extremes, like super KKK Democrat to like the most right-wing Republican over 100 years.
Look, you and I have talked about term limits and everything else, but you do lose cognitive ability at a certain age. It's different for everybody. That's why they can't put out a number as an age limit.
Yeah,
But if they just had term limits, it would resolve all that.
absolutely. And you wouldn't have career politicians.
And that's not the way the government was intended.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, I hear you.
Cool. What else you got?
That's it for now, my man. We'll get together next week. I'm sure we'll have some more data. We'll have some more fun. We'll see what our top 3 contenders are for the mugshots are.
I
So
cannot
get your
wait.
votes in.
Get your votes in, folks. Go back, rewind, take that, drop them into the comment section. Give us an upvote on those, and we will make sure that we share those with you next week. Thanks a lot for being here, and we're glad that we're into the fall and we're starting to roll into the later parts of Q3 and getting into Q4 and the holiday season and everything else. But it's going to be lots of fun before then. So make sure you subscribe to the channel so that we can make sure we get you all this information as timely as we possibly can. So we'll see you guys back here the very next week.